Good evening and welcome to another episode of Unscripted on Unchained RPG Review. I am Castlekeeper Bloodworth, and as you can see, this is my fifth try at trying to get my Half Elves video up there. For some reason, it could not process in its original form. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to embed it into this video, and that way when I look to upload it to YouTube, it'll work this time. So I'm going to switch over to the next screen, walk away, and it should go through, hopefully, run about a half hour's time or so. So without further ado, let's go right to it. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am Castlekeeper Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today's video, I am going to be talking about half-elves in Castles and Crusades. Now, obviously, there has been a big brouhaha over Wizards of the Coast and particularly Jeremy Crawford's statement that half-elves and half-orcs and any of the half races are inherently racist because of the half variant of it. And I'm not going to get into whether or not that is a useful conversation for Dungeons and Dragons. I mean that's entirely up to them how they want to proceed with that kind of a take. It really doesn't interest me or affect me in any way, because if I'm running a D&D, which I am currently, and some of my player characters in my group are half-elves, and never has that issue had come up in all of my years of playing the game. So I think that this is just a this is just a mindset that Jeremy Crawford brings to the game, and it's not one that I think is particularly useful. It certainly doesn't enhance or advance the gameplay in general, and it doesn't help the hobby. So it once again, portrays itself as a another thing for Wizards of the Coast to look and say, we're trying to correct this. And there is no real necessary purpose to correcting anything here, because half-elves are simply a people born of two races, not a part of either, and that's okay. And the reason why I say they're not really a part of either is that being half elf and half human in these cases have often been a source of conflict for those characters built into their background, which is something that I think generates a real unique perspective when you're role-playing those characters. And Trollord Games through Castles and Crusades really does take that to a slightly different area, which I think really does empower this race to stand on its own. So I'm going to go along with that and and highlight that aspect that Trollord Games really does get, and they understand it, and they put out just a much better take on half races than Jeremy Crawford at Wizards of the Coast. So without further ado, let's start taking a look at half-elves in Castles and Crusades. So here we have the player's handbook for Castles and Crusades, and you can get this for free on Trollord Games. You just go to the section for Castles and Crusades and Player's Handbook, and in the PDF you will find a free PDF where you can get the PDF for free. So, half-elf. The pairing of human and elf is an extraordinary and rare occasion, arising from unique circumstances or events. Elves are very guarded in their approach to humans, for they deem them strange in thought and deed. For love to be born of two races, an elf must find a human of great renown and surpassing beauty. Thus, the half-elf is the rarest of all races. Indeed, each half-elf differs so markedly in origin, background, and physiology from others that generalizations are near impossible to make. All right, so again, right off the bat, it's hard to put into one sack half elves. They're going to be such a unique combination of their background that they really are extraordinary individuals. Let's continue on. Description. All right. So half elves vary and greatly in appearance. I'm not going to get too much into that, right? In some cases, the dominance of one lineage is stronger than these half elves can pass on the full member of a lineage of either of the two races. Okay. So those are in some cases where it's hard to differentiate a half elf from an elf or a half elf from a human. Half-elves also vary greatly in height and range from that of the shortest of elves to the tallest of humans, and so on. The single consistent physical feature shared by all half-elves is a natural balance and ease of movement inherent from their elven parent. All right. So now their personalities. Half-elves are intelligent, perceptive, and possess quick minds. They are able to master many crafts and skills, but these are mundane as cabinet making or as extraordinary as wielding of magic. They exhibit an almost supernatural empathy for the world around them, giving them an uncanny understanding of people. Their shared lineage also grants them the ability to think on many levels simultaneously, an ability that makes them difficult to deceive. Long-lived by human standards but short-lived by elves, half-elves exist in a nebulous world between both races. They often find themselves uncomfortable in either culture and are far too rare and unique to develop societies of their own. Elves tend to look upon them as strange creatures, treating them with indifferent curiosity or even with outright hostility. Humans' reactions are as varied as their cultures, sometimes accepting half-elves without note, sometimes venerating them, and as often rejecting them with violence. Much of their reaction is determined by the half-elf's lineage. Half-elves that favor a human lineage can vary widely in personality, while those with a dominant elf lineage tend to exhibit elven values, ethos, and interests. Because of their longer lifespans, half-elves are generally well educated and knowledgeable about the histories and geographies, although this is not always the case. The lifespans, however, present problems. Human friends often die of old age when half-elves are but middle-aged. The long-lived elves, on the other hand, possess a psychology like that of near immortals, which half-elves have a difficult time understanding. This creates a loneliness and melancholy in half-elves, and sometimes the fatalism so strongly pronounced in elves manifests itself in half-elves as well. In some instances, a half-elf spurns both humans and elves, instead seeking the company of other races and cultures entirely. Racial affinities. Half-elves tend to enjoy the company of those of their favored lineage, but often have problems adapting and existing in either human or elf societies. House elves tend to be solitary, preferring not to congregate with other half-elves. A group of half-elves always attracts an enormous amount of attention and tends to highlight their status as misfits. Perhaps because of their exposure to discrimination, half-elves harbor few prejudices. They freely associate with dwarves and halflings, gnomes, and others. Their unique position occasionally allows them to act as intermediaries between groups and races. So here they're taking the typical somewhat negative view of half-elves that they get from both their human and their elvish counterpart, but they're still using that to form a a racial affinity of their own, where they lack very few prejudices, right? They harbor few prejudices. They're more open and accepting of others. All right, and here it states again that they freely associate with dwarves and halflings, gnomes, and others as a result of that. So, half-elves, you might see them more commonly in dwarven or elvish or gnomish inhabitants. All right. Half-elves can be found anywhere from human cities to woodlands. They live in all types of rural areas and so on and so forth, right? So I'm not going to spend too much time with that. Their racial traits and abilities, the mixed lineage of half-elves affects specific traits that half-elves inherit. Players choose a human or elf lineage that dominates their character. Racial ability modifiers are based on which lineage the player chooses. All half-elves possess the following three abilities, though. Empathy. Half-elves' uncanny ability to empathize with others is reflected in a +2 bonus of all charisma checks. This ability can be combined with attribute check modifications. Move silently, which is dexterity. This ability allows silent movement in wilderness areas and so on. Spot hidden doors is a wisdom ability. This ability allows half-elves to spot secret, hidden, and concealed doorways, and so on. Half-elves with human lineage possess these. So all half-elves have these: empathy, move silently, and then spot hidden. But if you chose one that is more closely related to human lineage rather than elfish lineage, I will get to each of those. So half-elves with human lineage possess these abilities on top of the other three already mentioned. Attribute check modification. The human lineage is reflected in a greater versatility than their elven kin, but not quite as their human relatives. Half-elven characters are allowed to choose one secondary attribute to which they gain a +2 modifier to all attribute checks. So it's not quite as much as a primary or a prime, which would give them a +6. This gives them a +2 in that secondary selection. Spell resistance. Half-elves of human lineage are somewhat resistant to spells and spell-like abilities that charm or unnaturally cause sleep. They get a +2 bonus to that. Half-elves with a elven lineage possess these abilities: attribute modifier of +1 to dexterity and a -1 to constitution, and they receive enhanced senses. So getting a +2 bonus to all checks involving listening. Special resistance. So they also get special resistance. Half-elves of elven lineage are particularly resistant to spells and spell-like abilities that charm or naturally sleep. They'll get a +4 rather than the +2 that the human lineage would give them. Here we have their languages. So common, elf, and 3 of the following: dwarf, gnome, goblin, halfling, or orc. They're medium size. Movement is 30. Ranger modifiers for them: they get a +2 move silent and +2 find traps. Their rogue and assassin modifiers, they get a +2 listen for their elven lineage, +2 find traps, and +2 move silently. And there we have the half elf for, oh, that's gnomes. There we have the half elf for Castles and Crusades. Let me switch views here. Sorry about that little confusion there. So as you can see, there's quite a bit here that a player has to work with if they're playing a half elf character, and it's a very unique way that they could play if they wish to do that. They could role play that out, being that empathetic listener, being that kind of individual that will talk to different groups of people, kind of like the group negotiator, or an envoy or something along those lines. So I think that it's incredibly useful to have this character race or species, whatever you want to call it, in the game. I mean, and half elves go all the way back to the very, very beginnings. I mean, half elves, you find them in Tolkien, you find them before Tolkien. So half elves are a mainstay of any fantasy fiction, especially high fantasy fiction, where you have humans and elves and dwarves and other, goblins and orcs and such. Certainly a mainstay in Dungeons and Dragons and in Castles and Crusades. And the idea to remove them because there is some kind of an inherent racism. The only inherent racism that is having half species or mixed race characters is held by the person that believes that. So that's the issue that I see with it, is that it's a reflection of the person making that statement and not on how the race is typically seen in the games where it appears. And so it's almost like victim shaming. It's like, oh, well, they're treated, negatively by either of their two half races that have come together to produce a child. And so therefore we should just remove them instead of giving it the possibility of role playing, coming from that difficult background and working through it and making the best of it. I think is a far more interesting and valuable thing to do. So that's just my take on it, and I will do a follow-up video. So I will be doing a series of character race spotlights for Castles and Crusades, as well as the classes. And so the next one, just to keep online with this, is I will do one on half orcs for Castles and Crusades. Probably I will do that on Tuesday, and it'll appear on Wednesday. And and then I will continue through the rest of the races for Castles and Crusades. I hope you like this video. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. Hit the alert button so you'll see when these new videos come up. The next class video is going to come up on Tuesday. It's scheduled for Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern time. That's when it will go live. It's already pre-done. And the others will follow every Tuesday and Thursday. And then I will mix in these Castles and Crusade race videos along the way as well. So you're going to be seeing a lot of Castles and Crusades on my channel for the next couple of weeks, which is awesome because it's just an awesome game system. And I'm currently working on planning for my Castles and Crusades campaign that I'm looking to begin sometime in September. You can see the kind of planning that goes into into a campaign, looking to make a long-term campaign, and it usually kind of takes, with coordination with your players, weeks if not months to really get everything just ready to roll out. I want it to be on par, if not better than, my nearly 2-year campaign I've been running with my AD&D first edition, and many of those players, not all of those players, are going to follow me over into Castles and Crusades beginning sometime in September. So I'm really looking forward to that. I know they're looking forward to that. And I have some new players that are coming in. And there's still some open slots for that as well as we go through these next couple of months of just planning. Could it launch earlier than September? Possibly, but I doubt it. So this will be my fall campaign launch, and looking forward to that. So thanks for joining. I hope you liked this video. And as always, I know this was a holiday weekend for me, so happy holidays to you. If you're off tomorrow, enjoy your next day off, Easter Monday, for many people. And if you are back to work, as I am tomorrow, then enjoy your rest of the week going forward. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care.